This is episode 2005 in our Vibrant Living series. I'm Kimberly, Henrie, and this is Living the Good Life. We strive in each conversation to bring you tips and insights that will illuminate your life and create joy. This week, we are talking technology and navigating the online world. We'll talk about internet safety precautions, shopping online, the best way to pay, those crazy internet games and surveys, and touch on the Zoom breaches that were an issue earlier this spring. Our guest this week is highly intelligent when it comes to tech. I'll do my best to keep up and help us all learn a little something. Let's jump right in. Our guest today has over 14 years of experience in all things technology. He started at the age of 6, taking computers apart and putting them back together again. Has always loved the way things work. Not only is he the president of Roaring Fork Help Desk Incorporated, but he also is the co-host of Geek Speak, which happens the first and third Mondays at kdnk.org. 4:30 p.m., helping listeners not fall into the same traps and pitfalls that his clients do. So we are in great hands today to learn about technology in the online world and what we can do to keep ourselves safe. Matt McBrayer, welcome to the program.
Hello, Kimberly.
It's so good to have you here today. How are you holding up during this situation with the coronavirus and COVID-19?
You know, everything just gets more and more busy for me. I've been helping my clients work remotely. I resell a cloud PBX, so my clients have been able to take their phone systems to their house.
Wonderful.
And so basically, instead of just ringing at the office, it rings at their house, and they're able to continue. Same with their computers. I just tell them to take their computers home, set up a VPN connection on the computer back to the office, and they're in business.
That is so incredible. Yeah. So many companies are doing that, and I think that we're really learning to appreciate our IT help even more, if that's possible, than we ever have before.
Right.
I bet you're hearing a lot of gratitude these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How important is it in this world where everything is moving online to have security on the internet when you're out, moving around and doing, whether it's personal information or business?
To me, it comes down to between trusting the services that you're using and securing your side of the services. So obviously, services spend a huge amount of time working to make sure that their platform is secure. And when they don't, it ends up being on the news pretty quickly. And, we've seen those a lot recently, especially with Zoom, where they erred on the side of ease of use, but they neglected security because of ease of use. So that's kind of a sliding scale in the computer industry, where it's like, well, you want to make it easy to use, or do you want to make it secure? And you have to choose a balance between those two business interests.
Right. Now, with the Zoom thing, I woke up one morning, I think it was Saturday, needed to jump onto a Zoom meeting, and all of a sudden my Zoom was locked down and had a password that I didn't know, and I had to do some digging to find out. Now they've kind of backed off on that, so that we now have, pretty much the same flexibility we had before, a little more tools, but then the responsibility rests on me as the user to turn on different security flips and switches. How important is that? From my perspective, from the end user's perspective, is it important for us to be using those security tools, or is it okay to be a little bit lax?
Well, then that's where the part about privacy comes in. So you have trust and privacy. So you have to trust the online system that you're using, and then you have to decide the privacy settings that you want to run on that. So for example, since we're talking about Zoom, you have the 9-digit meeting code or 10-digit meeting code, and if you just have that out there, somebody can just type in a random number and see if there's a Zoom meeting there and hop in and be disruptive if they choose to. Or you can add an additional layer of security where the person has to know the password. Now there's another layer to that, where if you send an invitation with a Zoom meeting that has the 9-digit code for the room and a password, that link that you send out is not unique. So basically, one idea for security would be that each link that you send out to your participants would be unique and would be a one-time use or maybe a 3-time use link. And so to get into that Zoom room, they have to use that link, and they can only use it so many times. On the other hand, if which is what's currently implemented, you have a link that's usable infinite number of times if somebody gets a hold of that, or if some participant, like they had problems with this in the New York schools, where the participant would hand out that link and then like have 60 people brigade the Zoom meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have a problem with that. And they've also done things where you can basically have somebody who connects go into a waiting room, so you can authorize them to go into the meeting before.
Right. So depending on who's in your meeting, maybe, and what you're going to be discussing would be how you would decide whether you want to go to those lengths.
Right. And as depending on your business structure, you may have to deal with SOX or HIPAA or GLBA. There's all these federal regulations on security that you have to decide how to follow if you're, in a business that is under those, demands from the federal government.
Right. Right. Gosh, you don't even think about that, but just all of our medical information, especially with something like this pandemic going on, that stuff is flying all over the internet.
Right. So I would liken email and Zoom and similar end-to-end encrypted tools. You kind of consider it a postcard. So if you wouldn't want to write that on a postcard and send it through the mail for people to just kind of, read as it's going through the mail, don't say it, basically.
Lock it down. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So the other side of that is I use a tool called, or an app called Signal, signal.org. It's available for Mac, PC, iOS, or Android. Mm-hmm. And you have to set it up on your phone first.
Signal?
So it's associated with your Signal.
Okay.
It's associated with your phone number, and they're working on making it so you don't have to you can just associate as a random set of characters. And they haven't implemented it yet, but they're talking about how to fully anonymize their system. But that's just something in the wings right now. But that is a open source, fully encrypted end-to-end tool, so that it's encrypted on your phone. It gets sent to the other user, gets decrypted on their phone, and you view it. And so there's nothing in the middle that has access to that information.
Great. It's so good to have somebody like you
around.
Talk
a lot more.
I'm feeling like I'm underwater and you're pulling me out. These are things that I just don't even think of.
And the other nice thing is you can set disappearing messages. So say you send a message and 10 minutes after they read it, the message goes away. So you could use that to send a password so if somebody needed to get into a router or an email account or something, you could send a piece of information and have it disappear from that system after a given period of time. Wow.
That's like a James Bond level of thing, right? This message will self-destruct.
Precisely.
Come to life. Oh, that's amazing. Your job must be so much fun.
Yeah. So I spend several hours every day looking at new tools like this and assessing them, plugging in. That's what I really love to do, is find new tools and implement them and test them and decide if I'm going to present them to my clients.
Tell us a little bit about your journey from back at the age of 6. What is that about?
So my father was the assistant dean up at Spring Valley CMC, and they had a auction of their old equipment somewhere around 1991, somewhere in there. And we ended up with, I think, 25 or 30 digital Rainbow 100s, pre-DOS machines. And basically he showed me that you could take the processor out, you could take the RAM out and the other components. And I ended up taking them all apart and getting about half of them fixed and working. And then I was just scrounging 386s, 486s, Cyrex processors, all kinds of stuff, and just trying to put together computers for gaming, mainly at that point. And then I got in deeper and deeper. In high school, I ended up working for Computers for Kids, and just had a blast there. We worked on truckloads, tractor-trailer truckloads full of computers there.
So you've just had a love affair all your entire life, it sounds like, with all things technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, moving from one part of it to another and just really enjoying every part of it.
Oh, that's amazing. And then you've taken that love and taken it to the airwaves at kdnk.org. Now that show, Geek Speak, airs Mondays, the first and third Mondays. You can listen to it locally on KDNK, or you can listen to it online. So anybody can listen in and hear what you guys are talking about. And
all of our shows are podcasts, so they're available online. You can go back and look for a particular topic.
Oh, great. Great. So there's a lot to learn from Matt outside of this half-hour program. Now let's talk about shopping online. Your everyday average consumer. I know that I think most of us are feeling more comfortable these days shopping online, but there's still a lot of holdouts. What keeps shopping online safe, especially with, as you said earlier, all the breaches that we hear about in the news? It seems like every couple of weeks there's a new breach. So, what's the best way to shop online and feel confident and safe that you are not going to be the victim of identity theft or lose money out of your bank account?
Well, so the first thing I would talk about is getting a dedicated credit card that has that you use for online systems. So if you're going to use it for Amazon or Barnes and Noble, any of them, it doesn't matter who, even the small guys, and everyone is required to do PCI compliance.
Mm-hmm.
So, and PCI is payment card industry security, something. I can't anyway.
So anybody who sells online is required to be compliant,
right. Or even takes a credit card at their place of business is required to comply with this to some extent, depending on what. There's different levels, and if you're a merchant or a payment gateway and so on, the rules are a little different. But basically, there's a set of baseline security standards that companies are supposed to meet, especially online. And most of the payment gateways, you've probably heard of PayPal. There's a whole bunch of them available. So basically, they're going to do most of the PCI compliance. So when you go to some mom and pop online store, there you're going to use one of these 40 big payment gateways, and they're going to deal with most of the PCI compliance. So when you type the information in, it's going to be sent securely to one of the payment gateways, and they're going to actually do the processing of the card. And so the security on the website, it's still important, but it's separated a little bit at least. So, but the big thing I like to tell my clients is get a small credit card, couple $100 credit limit or something, and read the contract. And usually one of them will have basically a zero fraud liability is one of the big selling points for most credit cards at this point. And so you just use that credit card online, keep track of it, and then if there's fraud, you don't have to go back and go, oh no, I have to update my credit card with Amazon and whoever else it is that you have, or with all the monthly stuff, so you don't have to go to Verizon and AT&T and your everything else to update your card information, because it'll just drive you nuts.
Right. So it would just be the one card instead of having to figure out all the different ones. What about a credit card? You say credit card. A lot of folks have debit cards attached to their bank account that are Visa cards or MasterCards. Are those okay to use online?
I generally don't recommend it because it's drawing directly from your bank account. So let's say, somebody tries to spend $800 for something in New York City, for example, and then you come back and say, well, there's fraud on that card. The bank has put a hold on that $800 in your card, and depending on their policies, you might not have access to that money for a few days, and so that could put you in a bind for checks that are they're in processing and things like that.
Okay, so always, if you're going to use one, use a credit card, not a debit card.
Yeah, and there's services like I think it's blur.com, and they'll basically set up I think it's privacy dot something. So you can look at abind.com, and they have a product called Blur, and you attach your credit card to it or your debit card, and then you can set up an individual card number for each online payment system that you use. So that if one of them gets compromised, only that one card number gets compromised, and you don't have to go through and deal with all your other ones.
Okay, so Blur is the name of that program.
From abind.com. I've run into a couple other similar tools, and I haven't had a time to look at them, but there are other ones that'll basically issue a single credit card card number, and you can say, well, I expect my Comcast to be X number of dollars every month, and if it changes, it'll either stop it from going through, or it will. You can do different settings to work that out.
So I know a lot of people are tech savvy and they can figure this out for themselves. Do you end up doing though this for people who aren't as tech savvy? Is there somebody that they can help them do it, set it up?
I usually help people on the other side of that. So I usually get the call after something like this has happened.
You're okay.
So, for example, somebody will call me and say, I made a mistake. I opened an email and they got into my computer and they got my credit card information and so on and so forth. So I end up cleaning up the computer and then I'll give them advice on should they change their bank account, get new checks. I mean, all those kinds of things, because depending on what information you have on the computer dictates what you're going to have to do, after you get compromised. So it's so much easier when you do it. Take some steps to mitigate that before it happens.
Do you have an opinion on a lot of times online when you go to shop, you have options. You have the option to pay directly with a credit card, or you have the option to use it like a PayPal or Venmo, or there's several Square. Do you have an opinion on which choice you should make? Does it matter as far as security is concerned?
Well, again, they have to follow the credit card processing security rules, and then things like Venmo and PayPal have their own set of rules when you're putting those processing options on your website.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's more looking at the fraud liability than anything else.
Okay.
So I've had very few problems with PayPal over the years. I've started to use Venmo a little bit. I think they just added their business to business or business to client payment options.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what about those pesky passwords that we have to have passwords for everything now? And Google does a great job of keeping track of those. If you utilize Google, is that safe? Do you need to use the same password? Do you need to use different passwords? How do we navigate all of these passwords, especially if we can't remember them all?
So what I recommend is set up a password manager, and there's many available. They have different use cases and different options. So you just have to decide which one fits your needs the best. There's like Dashlane, LastPass, 1Password, and the one I'm currently moving to is called Bitwarden. So really, I only have to remember 2 passwords right now. One to log into my computer and one to get into my password repository.
Why would you use that, Bitwarden or LastPass or one of those others, versus built-in tools that your browser offers?
So the big one is, and you can do this with Google and Firefox, you can have them save your information securely to their cloud components. So if you log in with your email address to Chrome, or you set up an account for Firefox, they have it so they will synchronize to all your computers and things. What I like is that many of these other ones have an app on your phone. So if you're away from your computer, you can go on the phone and you can look up the password. The other part is that a password, I'd have to look and see if Chrome or Firefox does this, but they will generate a random password for you. So most of my passwords are between 70 and 128 characters. So to get into my Google, the password's 128 characters to get into it. I don't need to know that password. I don't have to remember it. All I have to do is have one strong password to get into my password repository, and I can get in there and do what I need to do. But that brings up another issue, is that if your computer's compromised and there's a keylogger on it, or I had this happen to a client where we created this big password using a tool called Diceware, and that's a easy way to remember very long passwords because it creates basically a passphrase. But basically, we created this big password, and then like 2 weeks later, I just like, oh, my account got compromised again. And really, what happened was she typed her password into a computer that was not secure. It was compromised in some way, so they got a keylogger. So she typed in her username and password on that computer, and then they got in there and compromised her account again. And she was like, oh, they guessed my password. And I'm like, that's not what happened. It's almost impossible.
Interesting.
The one downfall of a password repository is that it, you only have one password, so you have to protect it in this additional way, so that if you type your password on a compromised computer, it still protects your password repository. And this is true for your email as well. Or the better option is to not type your password on machines that you don't know the history of.
Right. Or machines that are not not yours.
Right, exactly.
that's that's something you have to I have to think about all the time. Even if I go into like a business office or like a Kinko's or copy or something like that, where everybody and their brother is using those computers. Occasionally I have a need to go do that. And I always feel like I'm putting myself at a little bit of risk when I log into, say, my Google account in one of those environments.
Yeah, so you can get the PDF or something you're trying to print.
Mm-hmm. Is there any suggestions for how to handle that?
Well, I guess the best way would be if you can email them the file you're trying to do and have them open it for you so that you don't have to load your credentials. Or probably they'll let you put that information onto a pen drive and hand it to them. So
Sure.
you can just keep that whole part of it out of it.
Right. Now, let's turn to another really popular thing to do right now, especially since so many people are at home, and that is to sit on your computer on social media. And there's a lot of really attractive looking, fun games and polls and surveys you can participate in. Talk to me about your thoughts on that.
They scare me, frankly. And the part that scares me, well, one in particular one is like, oh, let's get your, name or whatever, or they ask you like personal questions that are like, mothers that would end up answering. So they ask you a question and you end up answering your mother's maiden name on that response.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically you need to look at the question and you see that basically it's one of your security questions,
Right.
which is a whole other set of problems. But basically you're taking a survey and you're answering questions that are likely to give information for your security questions for like your phone account or your internet account or some other account that's important to you.
Mm-hmm. So you think they're farming potentially for information so that they can figure out what your passwords are?
Well, that's one way to bypass a password. So if you don't know the password or you haven't acquired the password through other means, you can acquire information about that person. You can socially engineer that person to give you, and then they can pretend to be you, and you'll say the customer representative for the company that they're trying to break into your account with. They give you what was your mother's maiden name? And
right.
you go, oh, they answered that on this quiz, and I know what that is now.
Right.
And the other thing is when you play some of those games, you're giving permission for Facebook to share your profile and then the information that they've collected about you based on articles that you've clicked on and all kinds of stuff. So there's a third-party company getting a whole bunch of information about you so that they can give you directed ads inside of the game, and that's how they make their money with it.
So you're basically just opening up your life to whoever is running these games.
Exactly.
Okay, and making yourself a target for internet fraud and just extreme marketing, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll be looking for your next game that you put out, Matt.
All right.
What do you love about what you get to do that you've been doing all your life? What compels you to continue working in technology? And I imagine that you get a lot of customers that are just beside themselves. So it can be a frantic workspace for you. What keeps you going? Why are you doing it?
Well, it's getting to work on all kinds of different equipment, being able to choose equipment for my clients, install it, and configure it in a way that helps them do their business. And the other part of it is people who are curious about pieces of this information that we've talked about today, and sitting down with them and teaching them how to use these technologies is something I really do enjoy.
Well, you have so much to share with us. I feel like we've just touched the very tip of the iceberg. You and I have had some long conversations outside of this format, and I know that there's just so much knowledge in there and that you're an incredible asset to your clients. So I hope folks will reach out to you. Where is the best place for people to connect?
Usually by phone, which is 970-704-6725. You can also go to my support website, which is rfhd.net. and fill in a ticket, and I will contact you regarding what kind of service you're looking for.
So anything from help, I opened the wrong email, to I need to set up a new corporation, right?
I say out of the business management part of it, but I can help you digitize business processes and choose IT processes that help with the security of your company, and just make it more efficient in general.
Fantastic. All right. Anything else that you would like to share with us before we let you go?
Well, be safe out there. Make sure you clean your computer often. And you're welcome to listen to me on kdnk.org on the first and third Mondays from 4:30 to 5. And thanks for having me.
All right, Matt. Thank you so much. Thank you for spending your time with us. I hope you took away a nugget or two that will help you feel safe and secure socializing, shopping, and doing business online. If you'd like to know more, you can reach out to Matthew McBrayer at rfhelpdesk.net. rfhelpdesk.net. Also, I'd like to invite you to our Living the Good Life Facebook community. Just search for Living the Good Life Facebook group and ask to join. You'll get to share your comments about each episode, ask questions, and connect with others who are living a vibrant lifestyle. I look forward to seeing you there. In the meantime, I'm Kimberly Henrie, and this is Living the Good Life. Take care.